What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of The Trainer Scoop, a podcast dedicated to helping individuals passionate about fitness improve in life and lifting. I'm very excited to announce today's guest, which is Danny Wirt. Danny, thank you so much for taking time out of the busy schedule to make it on and talk to the audience. But yeah, if you want to say what's up to the people, feel free.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. I love to be able to sit and chat with like-minded individuals. So, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, of course. Going back, Danny was one of the first people that I met on the East Coast that kind of had that like-minded attitude. And I remember meeting you at Power Build Gym, which I occasionally make the journey down to the Philly area because I'm in Central New Jersey. I forget if I ever told you that. I occasionally make the journey down there to lift at a better gym because we really, unfortunately, don't have that quality of equipment around me. And I remember there might have been two different occasions where we were both at that gym at the same time. But the first time I thought oh, he's definitely like a nice and helpful guy. I'd never adjusted a combo rack before. And you were like all for like taking time out of your day and out of your workout to help me get that at the right height. So I really appreciated that. And then we kind of like started talking, and I thought it was really cool that you had went to, get your master's degree and that you were teaching at Temple. Little spoiler alert, some of the stuff we're going to get into. And yeah, just talking about like the research that you've done. And the other time, which I think I talked about this will be 2 episodes ago, was I was leg pressing, and you were like, what are you doing over here? I'm like, hey, it's like RPE 8 or 2 RIR, whatever I said. And you were like, oh, okay, so I'm having you try this. And I was not going at that 2 RIR, which I soon found to be the truth when I did it was like concentric failure on the leg press with you that one day. Those are fun.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that was a while ago. That was pre illness, but are the gyms even open in Jersey?
Not yet, man.
I was gonna say because
curse.
I didn't know that you were in Jersey, so that was new for me. But dude, that sucks. And especially if you have to make that drive to PA every time if you want to train at a real gym.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that the RIR is a great model to use relative to someone's capabilities and managing fatigue and that it's great. But I think that people lose sight of where they really are within that spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
And at times it becomes valuable to be able to discover, okay, where are we in that spectrum of failure? Let's really find out what failure feels like. Let's find out what failure is.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can have a better gauge as to what that feels like as we're approaching it using the RIR model.
Yeah. And that's pretty much exactly what we were talking about in that episode. Guy, and I said that you kind of reminded me of him because you guys have like similar, just like educated backgrounds and very good coach, in my opinion. And so we were talking about because he has a big online business, how it can be difficult to kind of convey that effectively to clients and stuff that he's done in order to do that online, because that's like all of his clients. So I think you hit that one right on the head. It can be difficult, but that was a learning experience for me.
No, and it sometimes, that it sucks going to failure, especially on something like a leg press. But, it really opens your eyes as to what that feels like. So when you start approaching that, you're like, man, this feels like I got 2 left. And then when you really know what it feels like to have 2 left in reserve, that puts a whole new scope. It's like, have I even been training at all? What is
Right.
this? Like, I've been sandbagging for years. So,
yeah.
No, and to talk about, training online versus training in person, it is totally different. There are absolutely some considerations that you have to make when you're working with someone online that you wouldn't have to make if you're working with someone in person. And, communication is key for that. And I think I think it's undervalued for some coaches. They're like, here's your program. This is what you got to do. Done. And I don't think that they promote an atmosphere that allows clients to feel like they can or should ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
but you should be asking your coach questions constantly. I mean, question their methods. If they don't have a rational answer for what they're programming, then they're not the coach for you. That's number one. And if they're not taking time out of their day to communicate with you and be able to discuss, then man, maybe they're not the right coach for you as well, just based off of that fact.
Yeah.
Because it is a very different mode of coaching.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Like you were saying, honestly, I guess I shouldn't even say this, but I have several clients, right? And I guess some of the clients that reach out to me, I wouldn't call them my favorite because I like you all, but some of the conversations I have where they're like, oh, sorry to be texting you like every day. I'm like, actually, I don't mind that for the spot that I'm in right now. Of course, that might change over time, but I don't mind if you shoot me a quick text and ask a question or say like, hey, what was your vision for this? It can, for the spot that I'm in, once again, it can be a great way to bridge that gap.
So that's where pricing becomes,
Mm-hmm.
something that you have to consider.
Yeah,
Your time allocation for doing that part of your life,
definitely.
because that takes up time. I mean, if you're
Oh
going to be
yeah.
engaging in a discussion constantly throughout the day and you have 80 clients, man, good luck being able to do anything else.
Oh man.
So that's where pricing and then capping your clients is going to be something that you have to consider at some point in your
Mm-hmm.
life. If you're just getting your feet started or you've been in the game for a little bit, that's where you have to maybe, think about what it is that you're offering, and then, uh, your experience to cost, what value you're providing for people. And that's where you really have to begin to question those things. Now, if you're experienced, you have a good following base, and you've been in the game for a while, then yeah, man, charge a premium. If you,
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that communication should be uh, integrated, like almost put as much stress on your communication as you do with your programming, because it's that important.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something that I don't see a lot of, and I've never thought that, but that's a very good point especially like with COVID and people's training situations, they might not want to train in person. That's a very valid point. I like that.
And so, if you have a big following and you can manage the price, and you can rationalize the price, because you don't have to have a big following to charge a high ticket price for the coaching service, because there's a ton of value. You just have to maybe find the right people that are willing to invest in that value. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to demonstrate, hey man, I can give you this value, and then you're good. But that's up for you or the coach to decide how much you're charging for that service. But with coaching online, in order to provide a really good service, I think communication is key.
Yeah. Well, you definitely already dropped the knowledge bomb there, Danny. Before we delve super deep into additional stuff, do you just want to tell a little bit about your background, what you got going on currently?
Yeah, so I got my undergrad degree in exercise and sports science at Temple University, where I had the great fortune of working under some really intelligent people. If you're not familiar, I'm sure you are, Dr. Mike Israetel with Renaissance Periodization. He was one of my professors. Dr.
That's
James
awesome.
Hoffman, also one of my professors. I mean, they were, both uh, big players in the company, and
I didn't know
really
that
intelligent
Dr.
people.
Hoffman was there.
Yep.
I love the
Um,
video that they did where he kind of built out a macro cycle throughout the year. And then I like
mhm.
implemented that into my own, and it's been super helpful. That was a
That was
cool.
actually one of the projects that we had to do in one of the courses that he taught. And I remember we had a group, and with three other individuals, including myself. And I remember working like day and night to make sure that it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we ended up getting 100% on that that project, which I don't know if he gave out too many of those.
That's
But I
awesome.
remember putting everything that I had into that.
Yeah.
So I digress. So that was my undergrad. I was very fortunate to have those individuals in my corner and having access to them during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Appalachian State for my graduate degree, also in exercise and sports science. I did some research there, worked with their strength and conditioning program, and gained some practical experience. It was during this time that I actually, I had a back injury for quite some time, and I didn't even get to start squatting and deadlifting until my senior year in undergrad. At this point, I'd been training my bench for quite some time. And so just as I was finishing up my graduate degree, I had signed up for a meet, and this was like 2 years post me starting to squat and deadlift. And I remember squatting 496 in competition, deadlifting 507 in competition, which for me after 2 years, that was huge. And so finished up my graduate degree. I worked at the Edge fitness clubs for a little bit. It was really hard to come out of the graduate program and not have any guarantee of a job. I'd been teaching at Appalachian State for the last year during my last year of grad school. And so I had some teaching under my belt, but there weren't really any teaching positions open for the following year, so I couldn't stay. And then there wasn't really anything available in Philly. So I had a buddy who luckily was a fitness manager at the club. So I had an in to get an interview, got the job, worked there for about a year, COVID. And so not working anymore. And for the last year, I've been working at Temple actually. So teaching at Temple, course or two. So it's not a full course load. I'm just an adjunct professor. I'm not, assistant, tenured. But I do that along with running my own business. And ultimately the goal is to be able to provide access for information and knowledge, at least within the realm of my expertise.
Yeah. And as we were discussing before I hit record, I think you're killing it with that. Of course, we'll plug everything at the end, but I really enjoyed the R&R where, you get into the research and you do it in such a way that it's so entertaining. There's a couple signature aspects that carry over from video to video that I really enjoy. You guys should definitely check that out. And then you have the anecdote hour, which is kind of like your podcast. Is there anything else that you currently are working on that front, or do those two things mostly sum it up?
So most of the stuff that I have going on that's public right now is the YouTube and the podcast, and then the coaching business where I have a registered dietitian that I work with, and just working with clients in a one-on-one capacity. There is something that I have in the works that isn't public knowledge, and at least keeping some of the details under wraps. But I'm working with the RD on that as well, along with if you're familiar with her, Kristen Dunsmore. So she's going to be joining the team, and the resource is going to provide almost like a one-stop shop for all things that are related to health and fitness for a relatively inexpensive cost. And it provides more resources for people for information. Just because nothing's launched yet, I'm not going to get into too many details, but again, everything that I'm doing is about providing more modes of information. The YouTube channel is so that I can provide a video element to it and maybe make things a little bit entertaining so that people are more interested in learning more about exercise and sports science. The podcast, the Anecdote Hour, is about putting things into perspective. So I know that anecdote is incredibly important with respect to being able to establish whether or not there's any legitimacy or external validity to any research that people have published. Research is really important, but in order to really be confident that we can be conclusive with any evidence, anecdote is also equally important. And in fact, anecdote usually ends up driving a lot of research. So anecdote is incredibly important along with the perspective that it provides. And so having that resource for people is incredibly important. And then teaching and then working with one-on-one, I'm trying to hit every, aspect of teaching that I can through those different platforms.
Yeah. I like to hear people's kind of like approach and reasoning behind why they might, structure their content a certain way. And it seems like you've got a really nice, almost like all-encompassing approach there. So it's cool to hear kind of like your logic behind it, especially as someone who likes to inform and create content as well. And yeah, like I said, guys, check it out. I'm definitely looking forward to everything that that you have in the works.
I appreciate it, man. Hopefully I can provide a little bit of laughs or some laughs with the YouTube videos too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, definitely.
I mean, I'm laughing half the time that I'm making them, so at
Hey,
least
that's
I'm
all that
having
matters.
fun. If it doesn't make any other laughs, at least I'm laughing and I'm having fun. So
I like your references, your wigs, the like we said, the beckoning. It's really well put together. But my question that came to mind as you were explaining kind of your progression, and it's something that is kind of in the forefront of my mind, is what was the initial motivator for you to continue your education after you got that bachelor degree?
honestly, it was Mike. Um,
Hmm.
I've always had a really big curiosity for science and for learning. My mom just sent me some old letters of recommendation for high school. And one of the ones that she showed me was from one of my middle school teachers, Mr. B. And he wrote about, all the clubs that I was in. I was in this chemistry club. I was in this, black holes club that he had,
Oh, sweet.
along with the chess club and whatnot. So I was in all these different clubs, and a lot of it was based around science, nerdy stuff for sure.
Hmm.
And so I've always had a really big interest in science and learning. And so when I was finishing up my undergrad, I had another great fortune with being able to work with one of the instructors there where I was for Temple, they're called Diamond Peer Teachers. And for this class, I was essentially an undergraduate teacher's assistant. I would
Hmm.
hold study group sessions with the students in the lecture, and I would also help with development in some of the quizzes and stuff. And so that was sort of my first introduction towards teaching in some kind of instructional capacity. While I also was a tutor at their Resnick Center, which is where the athletes go and they have access to tutors. So those were sort of the foundation for me establishing that I enjoyed educating. And with my relationship with Mike and some of the other faculty there, I sort of realized that going on and getting a graduate degree would help facilitate my learning more along with my skill base as being an educator. Now,
Mm.
originally at the time, it was about me going and eventually getting a PhD. And so that was sort of how I was structuring that plan. I currently do not have my PhD, although I'm looking at PhD programs.
Hmm.
Um, I realized after my graduate program, I was like, I need a break and need to step away from this, get some practical experience. I'll be honest, the graduate degree in exercise and sports science, and I'm very upfront about this to my students, especially since one of the classes that I teach is an introductory to exercise science course, that the graduate degree for exercise science specifically is for two reasons. Number one, you're going to then use it for a PhD, or two, there is some kind of job that you're in where it provides you a good ROI on your investment,
Yeah.
because it is not cheap and it really doesn't provide a whole lot of extra return outside of what you had in your undergrad. So if it is the stepping stone to then get your PhD, totally worth it. If it provides a good ROI on some job that you're working on, cool, it's
Yeah.
worth it. Otherwise, maybe not so much worth the investment. But in my relationship with Mike and talking with him, App State was actually where he went for his graduate degree, or his master's degree at least, and then going on to East Tennessee State. Um, that was sort of my trajectory there, and that's why I went that direction. Again,
Hmm.
initially it was to go and get my PhD, which after grad school I was like, all right, no way, not doing this. I need a break. The
Yeah.
last thing I want to think about was school, and the practical experience has been, invaluable. Like I would not have changed that. Again, considering it now and looking into some programs, but I have to also be cognizant of everything else that I'm working on as well, and making sure that I'm making the right decision. But I also want to make sure that I'm the best educator that I can be and the most informed that I can be, and weighing out whether or not that decision will help facilitate that is something that I still have to decide.
I see. Yeah. Well, definitely, I appreciate your honesty with the recommendations. Um, and I'm sure that regardless of what the outcome will be for you, it was great to have that experience, like you were saying. Whether you were, it sounded like you had some great connections already from your undergrad, but solidifying those positive connections, I feel like it can only help down the road. But yeah, that's
So
I like
I'll
I
be
like
honest, actually. So I say that to a lot of individuals. The best thing that I got out of my college career, and this is not something that everyone can say, although everyone has the ability to do it, are the connections that I made.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
If you do not use college and all of the money that you put into it to build your network, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are introverted and they, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. It's weird. Oh, shut up. You'll be fine. It's the real world. You're an adult. I'm incredibly introverted and I had no problem doing this.
I would have never known.
So put yourself out there and it'll end up paying off in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very good advice. Do you feel that now that you're actually one instructing the courses, has that helped you like solidify that knowledge, or what is it like to kind of flip it up from being the student recently to now the one teaching the younger pupils, I guess?
So, it becomes humbling at points because there's certainly, to call yourself an expert in something means that you know everything there is to know about it, or at least you're very well educated in that field. And I like to think that I'm very well educated in the field, but calling myself a true expert, knowing everything that there is to know, I think would be false.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I deal with imposter syndrome, where it's like should I really be here up instructing these people? But you know, battling with that is probably the biggest thing that I have trouble with. But finding myself in that position again, the imposter syndrome was like, should I really be here? Going back to when I was an undergrad, the positions don't really change all that much.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm instructing, I'm looking at myself as just as much as I am a student as I am an instructor. And just when I was a student, I'm looking at myself as I'm a student and an instructor. And
Yeah.
I say this to everyone when I talk about teaching in general, is if you think that you are the expert and you know everything and the students can provide nothing for you, then you are in the wrong job. Because I
Mm-hmm.
stand up there with knowledge that I've acquired throughout my tenure at Temple and then Appalachian State and all of the other resources that I use, and that's fantastic. But for me to then say that no one else can provide information to me as a student who maybe isn't in the position that I'm in, would be arrogant. So honestly, the way that I've looked at it isn't all that different. Where it's just the roles have changed slightly, but I was an instructor and student in undergrad just as much as I'm an instructor and student now.
Yeah, I see. I see. I really like that perspective, man. And it just kind of goes to show like who you are. Like you're always open to learning and always on the quest for more knowledge that you can utilize and then I'm sure teach to other people just to help make the world a better place. So that's really cool.
That's the goal. I mean, and that's what science sets out to hopefully do. Make the world a better place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when you were saying talking about like being an expert in everything, it reminded me at Ohio State, one of our professors, Dr. Kramer, he was talking to us and it was like exercise phys 2. And he was like, I thought, hey, we're at exercise phys 2. I chose to take this class. Like I didn't have to take it for my major because I wasn't purely exercise science. And I was like, man, I feel like we're getting somewhere. And he's like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. He's like, I know things that would just blow your mind. I was like, oh, all right, never mind. We're not here yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the constant quest for knowledge, and especially like how accessible people like Dr. Mike and so many other YouTube channels are making that information by effectively communicating it through different platforms and mediums than traditionally, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that I hate about the scientific research that gets published is not only is there a barrier to understanding the language that the researchers use, while mind you, it's incredibly important because we need to validate all of the information they're putting out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's for experts to kind of break down and identify. But then there's the monetary roadblock where it's like, okay, I have to pay to read these research papers, and not only do I have to pay, but I'm not even gonna understand them. And then also having to battle the media, with their information and,
Mm-hmm.
just taking maybe a snippet of what the abstract says when that's not at all what the paper was about or identified, that creates a ton of confusion and misinformation for the public. And so by having professionals put information out, I think it is incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And if you're not using these people as resources, then you're doing something wrong as a professional yourself. Now, with that said, you should also be skeptical of what these people say. I love Mike, and I think Mike puts out a lot of great information, but not everything that Mike says should be taken as gospel. Be skeptical about what professionals put out there, and then take away your interpretation of what they're interpreting, and then also do some other research yourself. I mean, if they're talking about volume, well, let's hear what Mike says, and then let's see what Bob over here says, because his information might be incredibly valuable too, and it may conflict with what Mike said.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to be well versed, and then make sure you're identifying who is an established expert, which can be difficult sometimes with social media
Oh my
because there are a
gosh.
lot of self-proclaimed experts. But I think it's incredibly valuable, and I think it's incredibly important for these individuals to put information out, and that's why I'm aiming to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point. It's kind of ironic that you brought up that example with the volume. I was re-listening to it's actually on Jeff Nippard's podcast, and it's called like the Volume Roundtable. I was re-listening to that last night and this morning, and I think it's so easy to get dogmatic with social media and who I'd say almost like who puts out the most content is like I've found myself like, oh yeah, they got to be it. Like that's who you're seeing the most. But then in that podcast, you also had Eric Helms, Lane Norton, Greg Knuckles, who are also renowned in their own right and good communicators. And it was cool to like, oh okay, well there are other perspectives out there. And man, funny anecdote. When I was just like in high school and into the first 2 years of my undergrad, I was so just like enamored by one fitness personality. And dude, it was the most ridiculous stuff that I was doing. And I like should have known better, but like squatting every day and waking up at 3 a.m. to go train at the gym. And looking back on it, I'm like, wow, if only I would have kind of had that scientific approach where I'm being skeptical, referencing other things, and then synthesizing all of my information to come to a better conclusion. But you live and you learn.
Hindsight is 2020, right?
Right. Yeah, you live and you learn, which is all part of the game.
To be honest, though, I think a lot of that can be really important for individuals, though. I like to compare it to, genetic elites in a sport and
Mm-hmm.
them trying to be coaches. Because a
Yeah.
genetically elite individual trying to coach individuals is usually, and I want to say for everyone, doesn't work out too well. Because the things that's going to work for that individual is, well, pretty damn near everything. As long as they're not really screwing it up, like running a 10K for their resistance training, then they're probably okay, because
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to respond to any stimulus. They're just going to get better. That's just because they're just elite. Whereas if you have someone who, didn't start off very strong and just like had to work tooth and nail to get better, they've had to do the research. They've had to have their ups and downs. They've had to work hard. just to get to a fraction of what that other person was able to do. So to be fair, and coming back to this point, you following that individual and then realizing, man, you know what, this was dumb. There's all these other resources, and now I need to be skeptical. Now I need to synthesize my own ideas, right? That was a progress or a process, and that process has helped to get you to where you are now. And I think that that's something that's important to recognize and keep into perspective.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's kind of like it's like the typical saying, like you said, hindsight's 20/20, but it's kind of like the process of getting to where you are now. It's definitely one of the most educational parts. My next question for you, Danny. So, for example, one of my favorite parts of, I guess, like applied exercise science is definitely like programming, whether it be in like a strength or hypertrophy sense. That's like something that I'm very interested in. I do a lot of reading around it. What's one area of the field that you're particularly interested in, or it could be just currently interested in?
So I've always been interested in sports psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's not is by no means an area that I have extensive background in. Um, I just find that the human psychology, especially when it's with relation to athletics, is incredibly interesting. I mean, something that I like to do, and I think it's gonna sound kind of cheesy, but it relates to keeping track to psychological parameters for athletes. And I do this for myself, is just, where is your mindset for this training session? And I keep track of that throughout the training cycle for my clients, so that I know, how are they feeling about training? Are they excited? Because what you end up seeing is usually, as someone's becoming way more fatigued, their motivation to train also comes down.
Yeah.
Usually not always the case. And there's other things that are going to influence someone's motivation to train. But something else that I use is my music. So if I'm on the first week of a mesocycle, or if I'm on a deload, man, I'm like listening to podcasts. I'm listening to chill music. I'm just going in and doing my thing and working out.
Yeah.
When I'm in the latter stages of a training cycle, and I am dead beat tired, and this is my overreaching week, and I'm trying to really push for some volume PRs or weight PRs, depending on what phase I'm in, man, I'm blasting some heavy music. So the psychology of the athlete has always been something that I've been relatively interested in, and I think that it's most of my experience in that realm has been anecdote related, not through empirical research and evidence, but that's definitely somewhere that I like to mess around with more.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I remember hearing you talk, the name of your guest is escaping me, but it was like, she was, I want to say, a national champion of some sort, or like powerlifter national champion. I don't know. It was on the anecdote.
Kristen Dunsmore.
Yes. Okay. The name was escaping me, but yeah, that the segment where you talked about the psychology in that was, I found that interesting. So my follow-up question is, do you know of anything in the literature that I guess you could apply to like an online coaching type of setup to gauge that for clients? Of course, if it's like your thing, you don't have to disclose it, but like a study that.
No. So, I am awful at remembering specific papers. It's just like music. Like if you like play a song, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that, and you're like, who sang that? I have no idea. So I can't name specific papers. But, and I'll be honest, a lot of it ends up being more anecdote and experience than anything. And this is why I think that anecdote is so important. There is a divide often, usually between application and research.
Right.
And I think that it's important to play around between the two, because the research may say one thing, but application may say another thing, or application may not work with in the confines of what research says.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just worked with clients, and I've kind of, again, communication is really important. So if I see someone's rating that says, man, like, I'm just here, I'm just working out, and it's their last week, okay, is that because they're really fatigued? What else was going on? Or,
Mm-hmm.
let's come around and say this is the first week and they're rating it like, man, I'm just here. Well, hold on. That's either we didn't deload properly or something else is going on.
Yeah.
And then, that opens the door for communication. So most of the approaches is through seeing what their values are and what they're putting in, and then communicating, and then really deciphering or discerning, okay, where is this rating coming from? Because nothing to consider is that's all subjective, man. That makes that really difficult, because outside of the lifts that they're doing and the numbers they put out for that, there's no objective data for that.
Yeah. Okay. It's a great point. And once again, I think it just kind of highlights like what you've got going on with the application and then still reviewing that research. It's cool to see that framed that way for me as well. And it was funny as you were bringing up the music thing. I prepped for a powerlifting meet last winter, and I made this playlist, and it was like, Metallica, Disturbed, just like definitely like that heavy stuff to try to get you psyched up for a maximal attempt. And I threw it on. I've been doing more hypertrophy based programming lately, and I threw it on like 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and I was like, man, I just can't get into this right now. Like, it was like a totally different style of training, and I just like my mood just wasn't there. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what exactly it was, but it's like you said, like your mindset and everything might just have to align with
And
your
I
current
try to
goal.
align as best I can.
Yeah.
If you're blasting, 6ix9ine or some Metallica or whatever floats your boat, and it's your first week and you're doing like 3-4 RIR, and it's like, I got that's done. Like, I know
Mhm.
that wasn't hard, but like, man, do you really need to be amping up that much for that? And then,
Yeah.
your motivation maybe not aligning with how intense the music is. So making sure that psychologically you're in the same place as your training is going to be important. And so I just use music as a way to help influence my mood with where I need to be with
Mhm.
respect to where I'm in my training cycle.
I see. That's something I feel like not a lot of people think about. They kind of just like will throw it on shuffle, but I might have to start. Maybe I'll make specific playlists for specific mesocycles if I ever get that bored.
Yeah, dude. And for a uh, meet specifically, like when I'm competing, I do the same thing for my temps. So
Hmm.
it's kind of funny. So I grew up with Dragon Ball Z, and so I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z fan,
Hmm.
and Vegeta Ride or Die. And there is a I can't. It's like Les something. He makes these like montages of uh, portions of battle scenes, and then puts like a dubstep behind it.
Oh
And
shoot!
there's this one like father son Kamehameha wave with Gohan and Goku, and that just lights me up like not like when it plays, I get little goosebumps. And so that is always my big PR song. I don't play that for anything else. It
Hmm.
doesn't lose its novelty because I only play it a couple times a year, if that. And
Yeah.
so that like my go-to. I don't touch that outside of that. But my other songs leading up to that, I follow the same thing as with my training cycles.
Hmm.
For my first attempt, I have something kind of upbeat, like, all right, we're in this. But at the same time, you have to manage your anxiety or
Yeah.
the anxiousness associated with just doing your first attempt. Especially that first squat attempt, you're already going to be so hyped and like, oh, this is the first attempt. Like, here we go. Like,
Right.
just having music try to bring you back down a little bit so you're not putting everything into that first attempt is really important. So, I structure my music for my meets the same way I do with my training.
Hmm. Very interesting. Hey, maybe untapped market there. Just saying. I remember at Power Build, I don't even know what it was, but like you had the aux. I want to say you were like streaming it from your laptop or something because you had your laptop out and you were I forget what you were doing. You might have been like recording RIR or you explained this to me, but I thought it was an interesting thing in itself. And you had the playlist on.
I
I
was
was like,
actually probably doing I was probably doing work actually. If I had my computer, I was probably doing work.
That's awesome.
Which is something, I mean, if I'm just sitting there doing nothing and,
Hmm.
being unproductive, I might as well be productive and at
Yeah.
least take myself away from the training sometimes because, again, stick to the same point. You don't want to necessarily be super amped up the entire time. So be able to
Hmm.
step away, come down for a little bit. All right, let's just come back to the monotony of doing work.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna take a couple seconds to re-engage, get ready, let the music facilitate that. Bam, next set.
Right. I like it. I like it. On the same topic of lifting, I've been following along with you on Instagram, and it seems like right now you're looking to build back up some of the pre-quarantine strength you had. And I
Mhm.
remember, I might be messing this up a little bit, but in the post you had hit like 405 by 8 or something. So what is that path back up to that? I mean, that's an impressive level of strength. So what does the path back to that look
So
like?
that was that's another humbling experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
I squatting is like my secret love, or maybe that's not too secret because most people that I know that I love squatting, but
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was 408 was or 405, sorry, for 8 was a pause squat PR that I had, and
Oh.
420 for 8 at 2
Okay.
reps in reserve was my
Ooh.
other PR. So I'm coming off of doing that, and right now, like I'm working with 225 and 275, and these are for my high rep sets where I used to be benching that weight for the same
Mm-hmm.
amount of reps. So it's really humbling, number one, and it helps to, again, have some perspective and recognize why I am where I am. But for building it back up, well, I just need to build my base back up. But, it's not all that different than what got me there in the first place. I mean, over quarantine, I lost about 10, 15 pounds, so that didn't help either. So
Yeah.
reacquiring some of that lost lean mass, number one, and having the training to facilitate that and build that foundation again is going to be what's key for getting me back there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why people think that you need to change your training strategies all that much just because you're in different circumstances. Like, oh, nah, bro, I'm cutting. I need to do high reps, or I'm massing. I need to lift heavy weight. Well, okay. The thing that got you big was doing high rep. Why would you change that for cutting? So I don't like when people change their approach just because they're changing their diet or something. So nothing is really changing, and just building that foundation again, uh, using hypertrophy-based mesocycles and designs to facilitate growth, and eating accordingly.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm doing now. To say that if I do X, Y, Z by December, this should yield A, B, C. That's impossible to do. Uh,
Right.
you know, I can't measure out and depict and um, guess that this is going to give me these results. But I do know that X, Y, Z will yield A, B, C results over time if done correctly.
Yeah.
So the goal is to get back up to those 400-pound markers, by the end of the year. And I think that that's reasonable only because once you have that acquired muscle tissue, and it's established, it is very easy to come back once lost.
Mm-hmm.
I like to use I call it the McDonald's model, to kind of express how that works. So if anyone is unfamiliar with how the myonuclear domain and satellite cell proliferation works, when you train, you will stimulate some satellite cell proliferation. It goes in the cell, eventually creates a nucleus inside the cell. And that cell is responsible for delegating responsibilities towards a certain amount of space. So where this compares to McDonald's, if you were to have a plot of land and establish, okay, I want a McDonald's right here. Well, you need permits, you need to build it, you need workers to build it. It takes time, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of work, right? Just like building new tissue is, it takes a lot of work. So there's the comparison there, number one. Now, let's say you have your McDonald's already kind of established, and you have your manager or general manager kind of running the show. You have all your employees running the day to day. And then, oh my God, recession hits. people aren't nearly or buying nearly as much food as they were before for whatever reason. Money's short, right? They go to other lengths to get food. You don't need the workers anymore, right? Well, that doesn't mean we just knock the whole McDonald's down. We still have people that want McDonald's. We just maybe don't need as many workers. So we keep the general manager, we keep the foundation, we just lay off a bunch of the workers. Well, the same thing here within the muscle cells, right? We still keep the nucleus that's responsible for delegating so much space, but we just get rid of some of the workers. And then once business picks back up, cool. We already have the foundation, we already have the general manager, we have everything we need. We just need to hire new workers again. So getting those workers back in there, just like rebuilding some of that muscle back, happened. For me, I don't have much of a concern with being able to get back there. It's just making sure that I have the right approach to facilitate that.
All I got to say is I'm going to call up Apple because this man deserves the Educator of the Year award. That was a great analogy. I like that. And honestly, that was a really great analogy. I've heard, a lot of people talking about like, oh, well, it's easier to, or it's not easier, but it is possible to gain back that lean mass without having, to go to the lengths that you originally did. But that was a really good analogy. I'm gonna have to make a clip out of that and put it up.
So if I were to sit here and explain all of the intricacies of how that process works, I would lose you. And I would lose 95% of the people that would ever listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
But if I provide it in an easy to understand manner, well, now you kind of understand why you're able to gain that muscle back so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that people misunderstand with teaching. The best teacher is not going to be the most intelligent individual. I've had some instructors who were like miles away more intelligent than me, and like I couldn't stand it. Like I read one of the dissertations of one of my biology professors. I didn't understand half the words in that piece of paper, but as an instructor, she didn't know how to convey the information. So you can be the most intelligent person in the world. That doesn't make you a good educator. A good educator is someone who can take complex information and make it widely available and easy to understand for individuals.
Yeah. What do you think the most difficult topic in your current curriculum is to teach?
With the information that I'm teaching now, there's nothing that's necessarily overly complicated.
That's fair.
I use a lot of the same analogies that I use now. In the intro course, a lot of it's just introductory based information.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's super complex. However, it may not be very complex for you and I. So because I've been through this information so many times, I don't want to say it's necessarily complex information. It's mostly about making sure that I'm conveying the information in a way that's easy to understand. Again, because I need to make sure that these students can walk away with more information that they had before. So again, not necessarily complex information for you and I maybe, but for these people who maybe have no underlying foundation or knowledge, right? Same thing with the McDonald's example. They have no foundation or knowledge. So you have to ease into it and work and build it. And then now that you have the foundation, you can start talking about those more complex intricacies for those processes. That is not my job with the courses that I'm teaching right now. So it is luckily not too difficult. I don't have to get into those intricacies too much. Most of it's me providing analogies that help to make the complex information easier to understand.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I had a funny memory from my intro course. And we got into this huge, so I don't know, it was probably similar at Temple with the size of the student body, but we had probably 160 people in that course. And I remember the entire class got into a huge debate because they felt that one of the test questions was unfair and that he was asking what metabolic pathway was being used in tennis. And so kids were like, oh, is it a game? Is it a match? And so he was like, oh, it doesn't really matter. And we were like, yeah, it kind of does. I don't know why I thought of that with the intro, but honestly, that was such a fun course. And I'm glad that those kids have someone that's willing to establish those building blocks of the foundational knowledge so they can go on and be inspired and have fun.
Then they can go on to the more intelligent people, the smarter people, and then they can learn all the intricacies from them.
Right. Hey, you'll be
So
there.
actually, I find it difficult sometimes when you have an instructor who lays out questions like that. And so I had to complete a personal training certification in order to work at the gym. And, you know, I didn't study for it because I didn't feel like I needed to.
Yeah.
And when I took the exam, one of the questions had asked, which of the following macronutrients has a carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in it? And the answers were protein, carbohydrate, fat, and glycogen. I'm like, what? How am I supposed to answer this question?
Yeah.
Because there are several answers to that question, and there isn't there was, and this is a certifying body who is giving people certifications, and I'm like, flag here, we have a problem. And I actually left that in one of my reviews to them, and I mean they had responded, but it was a blanket response.
Yeah. That's fine.
And so to have that come back to the instructor, it's important that we're making sure that, one, we understand when we're wrong and we correct the mistake as best we can, especially when you're in that position. As a professional teaching students, you want to make sure that you're providing questions that are going to facilitate the learning, and making sure that you're evaluating them based off of the information that you taught.
Mm-hmm.
And then understanding when we're wrong, and acknowledging that, because if you're an instructor and you say that everything that you say is gospel and correct, then you're also not doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting that the instructor was just like, well, it doesn't matter, because no, it absolutely does matter. You know, whether you're in a game-based setting or a training-based setting, and well, it depends on what the answers provided were, like what was laid out. But like, I mean, realistically, you could be using all of your energy systems, your pathways. So I like, if all of the above was one of the answers, I'd be like, all right, maybe it doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah.
Because you're probably using all of your metabolic pathways. Whether you're in a practice setting or a game setting. Now, game setting, I would argue, is probably higher paced, and you know, you're going and going and going. Although I don't know a ton about tennis and how that maybe differs from practices, but because I don't want to speak to what practices are like for tennis players, but I would imagine maybe there's more resting every here and now. Again, right. So I don't know.
Needless to say, we all got credit for that one.
And that's another thing. So understand that if you're evaluating people and you're in that setting, make sure that you are fair with your evaluation and your scoring. Like if you mess up with that, like, all right, man, like I messed up, make it known to the students that you acknowledge that too, because then they will respect you more. If you just straight up said, no, you were wrong as the student because I am the instructor, then they're not going to respect you.
Yeah, it's cool to hear this perspective. I feel like quite often, you know, I'm pretty fresh out of undergrad. A lot of people kind of like see these figures, and of course we had like teaching assistants and, you know, graduate, what's the official title when a grad student is teaching a class?
So they're either teacher assistants or they're graduate assistantships. So
okay. Yeah.
GA or TA.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have them, but then like you almost like, as a student, at least me, I wouldn't want to like go up and try to like correct the professor, especially some of the professors we had, where like you maybe should, but it's cool to see your perspective.
I would, so there's a difference between correcting and asking questions.
Yeah.
So it's much like criticism versus constructive criticism. Like, and if you want to open up debate, like if you were to tell me something that I fundamentally disagree with, I'm not going to straight up tell you that you're wrong. I'm going to be like, okay, well, I totally see where you're coming from, but what about X, Y, Z? And we're opening up the page for discussion, because discussion is very different than just flat out saying, no, I think you're wrong. Because bam, then the defense is up. I'm not going to want to talk to you. You're wrong. You're the student. Like, that's not conducive of a discussion-based environment.
If only we could take this discourse to a national level right now, I'll tell you.
So I think that that's something that instructors need to open up. And I think that's something that students need to open up as well. Students need to open up the opportunity to discuss and ask questions that create discourse and discussion, and don't, one, stay silent and think, oh, this person's wrong. And then don't also criticize, because that's, regardless of who it is that you're talking to, which is professor or not, if you find out telling people something that they're wrong, well, fuck you. I'm not going to want to talk to you. Bye.
Right.
Like, no. So you'll find that with anyone that you're discussing with, science or not, just opening up discussion. Make sure that you become approachable, because otherwise no one's going to want to have that discussion with you.
Yeah, very good point there. So Danny, I know you have some things behind the scenes in the works, but what can all the audience be looking forward to seeing from you in the near future?
Continued goofy content on YouTube, number one.
I love it.
I will continue posting that. I Tuesday and Saturday are the 2 days that I post, and I'm going to continue to do that even after the semester starts. And outside of the podcast and the YouTube, expect to see some more announcements for the projects that I'm working on. Between October and November is kind of when we're looking to launch the service that we're going to be launching. Again, everything that I do is to try to provide an outlet that makes this complex information easier to understand. So the resources that we're going to be providing do exactly just that. And we want to build a community around that aspect, making this complex information easy to understand, making it an environment where people are willing to ask questions and engage in discourse, because again, that is so important. And then to not look at me or the other individuals that I'm working with as though everything that they say is gospel, because if people start taking those things as gospel, then they're not going to think critically and then look to other resources, and then the discussion is lost, and then there's no progress.
Right. I think that approach is definitely the key for, I guess, like quality and longevity, really. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to checking it out. Of course, I'll definitely be linking the YouTube, your Instagram, in the description of this podcast and in the comment section. But is there any other, place where people can look for your content, the projects that you have going on, any other like websites or platforms?
So the coaching service is vpdiet.com. So I mean, if you're interested in coaching, I mean, that's something that you can look into. As far as social media, it's just my personal social media, just Danny Wirt. And, I'm open to engaging in discourse or discussion through any of those platforms. As far as the future projects, there's, that's still in development. So there's nothing that you can look into for that currently. But I will be launching and announcing all of that information on my social media platforms. So if people are interested, then they can go to my social media to then find out, how to find more information on that. Oh
yeah. I have a feeling we'll be on the lookout for it. Yeah, like I really appreciate you taking time to come on, man. The perspective it's really refreshing for me, and it's I have 16 episodes now. I feel like this one's been unique, just having your background and your experiences and bringing that to the table. So I really appreciate that. I know the audience will probably appreciate that as well. If they don't, they can.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time as well. I mean, again, it's just like my interpretation of my role as an instructor. It's like, hey man, I'm up here, I'm a student just as much as you are. I'm just the one in front of the classroom. You're the one sitting at a desk. That's the only difference. So, being able to talk to you or like-minded individuals, that allows me to gain perspective through them as well. So, just taking some time out of my day to discuss these things, it's fun. I enjoy it, and
Yeah.
it helps me to grow as well. So
Yeah.
it was my pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you once again, Danny. And thank you all so much for tuning in. And we will catch you in that next episode.